This is the NFC West, the best division in the NFL. But who's going to be division champs of one of the best divisions the NFL has ever seen? The Arizona Cardinals?
DeAndre Hopkins!
The Los Angeles Rams?
He'll take it in for the touchdown!
The San Francisco 49ers?
George Kittle on the signature play.
Or the Seattle Seahawks?
Touchdown! What a catch!
We will go through each of these teams and talk about their strengths and weaknesses and how they could win this loaded division. And I'm going to show you guys some stats on just how good this division is. And at the end of the video, I'll tell you guys who I think has the best chance to win this division and why. Okay, let's talk about how good this division is. So let's talk about the defensive lines, which were 2nd in sacks, 4th in sacks, 7th in sacks, and the 49ers were 21st. But they didn't have Dee Ford or Nick Bosa, and they will have them back this year. Okay, the average team in the NFL that's not the NFC West had 34 sacks. The average team in the NFC West had 44. That's crazy, and that's without Chandler Jones, Dee Ford, Nick Bosa, or JJ Watt. Like, are you kidding me? Now we're going to start talking about the teams, and we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals. Although they were 8-8 in 2020, they could have easily been like 10-6 or even better if they were in an easier division. And in the offseason, they signed JJ Watt, Malcolm Butler, AJ Green, and James Conner. So the biggest weaknesses and concerns for me are defensive consistency. Like adding JJ Watt and Chandler Jones is awesome. But they were literally just average in 2020. They were 13th in yards per game, and they just allowed a lot of points. And JJ Watt and Chandler Jones are like monsters. If they can stay healthy, the problem is if they're healthy, it's a top 10, maybe 5 defense. And if they're not, it's probably average again. And JJ Watt, he's so good, but he's super injury prone in the recent years. And you never know with someone who's been struggling with injury like he has. And the same for Chandler Jones. Coming off a season-ending injury is always risky. You never know if that player's going to be the same. And Kyler Murray, although he did start 16 games, seems to always be banged up with a shoulder injury against the Seahawks, and he missed most of the Cardinals' last chance to make the playoff against the Rams with an ankle injury, and also against the 49ers, he got injured in the last seconds. He just seems to always be banged up. And the last weakness is a lack of a good tight end. This is one dimension that their offense lacks, and every other division rival has a very, very good tight end. Gerald Everett for the Seahawks, Tyler Higbee for the Rams, and George Kittle for the 49ers, who are all huge upgrades over any of the Cardinal tight ends. And enough of the Cardinals' weaknesses and onto their strengths. We're going to start with offense. Their whole offense, beside tight end, is loaded. They have the 12th ranked offensive line and a top 10 quarterback, and a top 3 wide receiver, and 3 number 1 running backs, Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, and James Conner, and they have the 6th best offense in the NFL in 2020, without James Conner or AJ Green. And their last strengths that I will mention is their leadership and their veteran presence, which Malcolm Butler, JJ Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, and Chandler Jones, they have so much leadership, I'm sure their locker room will be one of the best in the league. So, what do the Cardinals need to do to win the NFC West? Number 1, the defensive line needs to stay healthy. JJ Watt and Chandler Jones are monsters, but they're both injury prone. 2, the offense needs to be more consistent. Kyler needs to stay healthy even if it's just minor things. Okay guys, before we move on to the 49ers, make sure to hit like, and if you enjoy NFL content, subscribe. Alright, let's jump right into the 49ers. And this team is probably the biggest wildcard in the division because they went 4-12 to 13-3 and back to 6-10. And obviously this year was just injury riddled. They lost Nick Bosa in week 2 for the whole season, and Solomon Thomas tore his ACL in week 2 and also is out for the whole season. Also, Jimmy G only played 6 games, George Kittle 8 games, Deebo Samuel 7 games, and Richard Sherman only 5. It's just insane amounts of injury. It's like they literally played with half a team for the whole year. It's gotta be the worst injury bug I've ever seen. So what are their weaknesses? And the biggest one is clearly quarterback, because Jimmy G just cannot stay healthy. You never know what you're getting when you draft a quarterback in the first round either. And honestly, I like Jimmy G. I think he's a top 10 quarterback when he's healthy. That's the problem though. They're paying him $27 million a year, and he's literally been healthy 1 out of 3 seasons, which, as George Kittle says, the best ability is availability. Another weakness is obviously injury. Will Nick Bosa be the same player he was in 2019? Will George Kittle be healthy? Just so many injury questions that need answers if they want to win this division. Okay, on to strengths. And the defense as a whole is a strength. Without Nick Bosa and DeForest Buckner and Solomon Thomas and Richard Sherman and so many others, they were still top 5. And they lost Robert Saleh, which hurts a lot, but they still have a ton of talent. And even with all those injuries, they still had a top 5 defense. They have a top 3 linebacker in Fred Warner. So defensive wise, you can basically bank on the 49ers having a top 10 defense. Another strength is weapons. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk is not a group of weapons you want to mess with. And to go along with that ridiculous offensive line and running game. If the 49ers can get some consistency at quarterback, they easily can get back to a Super Bowl form. So what do the 49ers need to do to win this division? Number 1, stay healthy. It's obviously the top priority after 2020. 2, find consistency at quarterback. Jimmy G is great, but he has to stay healthy. Or it might be Justin Fields or Mac Jones. You never know. If both these things happen, then they have a huge chance to win this division. Before we get started on the Rams, leave your initial thoughts about this division in the comments. The Rams are one of the most consistent teams in the NFL since they hired Sean McVay. And since they sport the best defense in the NFL, they already have a massive chance to win this division. And their first weakness is the offensive line. And don't get me wrong, their offensive line is super solid. But when your best offensive lineman is 39 years old, he could have a drop off at any point, which makes him a really risky starter. Another potential weakness is losing defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, because losing a coordinator who has the best defense in the NFL is never a good thing. And the last weakness is, well, really not that much. They're freaking loaded and are close to flawless. If there was one small thing, it would be losing depth in defense. They lost Michael Brockers, Morgan Fox, Samson Ebukam, and John Johnson. But other than that, they're a really well-balanced team. And their biggest strengths, to me, are having 2 All-Pros on the defense, Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. And the second is Sean McVay, who to me is the second smartest coach in the division. So what do the Rams need to do to win this division? Number 1, they need to stay healthy. And 2, they need to win that crucial game. Last year, they were not division champs because they couldn't win that crucial game against the Seahawks. So they need to win that game and be clutch when they need to be clutch to be division champs. And the final team in this division, the defending champs, the Seattle Seahawks. And before we go any farther, yes, I am a Seahawks fan. And you can take that to the bank and say I'm biased, or you can just take the facts that I'm giving you and know that I'm being as unbiased as I possibly can be. Alright, we're going to start with the biggest weakness. It's a very clear weakness. It's the Hawks' interior line, because Aaron Donald has a field day every time the Rams play the Seahawks. And the Seahawks traded for Gabe Jackson, which helps a lot. And our other guard is good, but he's also very young. He was a rookie in 2020. And the biggest problem is center. Ethan Posick should not be a starter. He's a fine backup, but I don't want him facing Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald twice a year on that super crucial division game. Another potential weakness is corner. DJ Reed's great, but the other guys, the guy from the Jets and Akelio Witherspoon, you just don't know. They're always up and down. And this is not necessarily a weakness. There's so many questions at this position. And on to the strengths. The Seahawks by far have the best quarterback in the division, Russell Wilson. The best receiving duo in the division, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, although Deebo Samuel and George Kittle are very close. Another strength is the Seahawks finally have a good tight end. Since Jimmy Graham, they have not had a good tight end in a long time. Now we have Gerald Everett, who being the second tight end on the Rams still averaged around 500 yards per season, which is freaking good. And the final strength is the defense as a whole. Just like the Rams, we have 2 All-Pros on defense, Jamal Adams and Bobby Wagner. And recently I made a video on how the Seahawks defense went from last to first last season, because the Seahawks were like by far the worst defense in the NFL. In the first 7 games, they gave up the most yards in NFL history. And in the last 9, they led the NFL in sacks and with their 3rd best defense in yards per game. So, what do the Seahawks need to do to win this division? Number 1, let Russ cook. You can't just rip the rug out from under him after he has some turnover games, because the offensive line is just falling apart. Number 2, continue the growth on defense. Continue what we had the last 9 games. Alright, now for the moment of truth. Who out of these 4 teams can win the NFC West? Okay, this is a really difficult question, like a really difficult question. So I can't just answer it and say this team's gonna win. I'm gonna start with the team I think has the least chance to win this division, the Cardinals. Here's why. They have the youngest quarterback in the division who has not proven he can stay healthy or win the big games. Also, the Cardinals coach, Cliff Kingsbury, has never had a winning season. So there's just too many questions around this team. So I give them a 15% chance to win this division. The team that I think has the second least chance to win this division, although they have a lot more potential than the Cardinals, is the 49ers, because the injury questions are just too big. The quarterback questions are just too big. Will it be Jimmy Garoppolo starting, or will it be Mac Jones or Justin Fields? Just too many questions, especially around quarterback. They have a heck of a coach, but struggling at quarterback is not good in the best division in football. I give the 49ers a 25% chance to win this division. The last 2 teams, the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. I absolutely cannot decide between these 2. But here's why I think both of these teams have a better chance than the Cardinals and 49ers. Both teams have better quarterbacks in this division. They have the least amount of questions surrounding their teams, so the most balanced and established teams. Seahawks were 12-4 and the Rams 10-6. So I give these teams 30% chance to win the division. So record-wise, I think the Cardinals will be 10-7, the 49ers 11-6, and the Seahawks and Rams 12-5. So I mean, who do you think is going to win this nightmare of division? I think personally, all 4 are going to be playoff teams. But other than that, if you really did enjoy, make sure to hit like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe, because this took me a long time. And I'll catch you guys in the next upload. Until next time.